Good morning from New York City, where I'm just down the street from the United Nations headquarters where the General Assembly is underway. Good afternoon to those in Europe, and hello to those joining us from all over the world. I'm Fred Kemp. I'm President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. I'm delighted to invite you to Atlantic Council front page, or #AC front page, our premier platform for global leaders. Today we have the privilege of hearing from one of the most remarkable European public servants, one of my favorite public servants, Thierry Breton, the European Commissioner for the Internal Market. Over the last year, actually the last 18 months, we've hosted presidents, prime ministers, world leaders of all stripes, from politics to business to the military to civil society, on this platform across the world. But today I'm excited to say that this discussion is both live and virtual, so hybrid. The moderated conversation will take place in our new studios in Washington, D.C., where we are following rigorous COVID protocols. COVID-19 remains one of the most acute challenges we face together as a global community and transatlantic community. Defeating this pandemic will require international solutions, with any effective global solution and lasting global solution requiring U.S. leadership and European leadership alongside each other. We have a lot of ground to cover with our European partners, not just on COVID-19, but also on systemic challenges posed by China, navigating the future of an ever-increasing digital world, supply chain sustainability, and greener economies. If this sounds like a daunting list, it is, and we have already seen fissures in the transatlantic relationship in recent weeks, such as through the crisis in Afghanistan. And although the move toward the US, UK, Australia defense partnership is a positive one for the Asian region, there's also fissures that have come from that in a transatlantic nature, and particularly with France. But we've also seen some welcome developments, including President Biden's removal of the COVID travel ban from EU countries announced just yesterday. In light of both the challenges and the great news regarding the travel restrictions, the Council is doubling down on our engagement with the EU and with our European partners, with our Europe Center leading the way to reimagine the transatlantic partnership. We'll be honoring European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen with our Distinguished Leadership Award on behalf of the European Union on November 10th in Washington, D.C. We aim to be the bridge connecting our most important partners and allies. And that is why we are here today, to hear from Commissioner Breton about greater transatlantic cooperation on fighting the COVID-19 pandemic and how we can come out of this period stronger, more unified on health, digital, and industrial policies. So, Mr. Commissioner, welcome back. It seems odd that I'm in New York and you're at our headquarters in Washington, D.C., but it's great to have you with us. The Commissioner joined the Atlantic Council in May for the Europe Center's inaugural EU-US Future Forum, held in partnership with the delegation of the European Union to the United States. Commissioner Breton has held his current position since December 1st, 2019, and is responsible for the smooth functioning of a single market, including the free movement of goods and services, both online and in the physical world. Before his current role, he was the CEO of the French technology company Atos, so he knows how the private sector works, and he was the French Minister for Economy, Finance and Industry, so he knows how national politics and economies work as well as the EU more largely. Today, Commissioner Breton is in the United States for discussions with the White House on the launching of the US-EU COVID-19 task force. Your visit, Mr. Commissioner, comes alongside notable developments within the EU, including the European Chip Act that President von der Leyen announced at her State of the Union, the launch of the Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority, and of course, the European Union's continued work on new rules for the digital space. So thank you for joining us again, Mr. Commissioner. We are looking forward to this discussion, which will be moderated by Ben Haddad, the director of the Atlantic Council's Europe Center. Before turning over the floor to Commissioner Breton for special remarks, I do want to remind our audience that they can join the discussion and ask questions using the Zoom Q&A function. And if they want to tweet, please use the hashtag #ACFrontPage, hashtag #ACFrontPage. With that, Commissioner Breton, I pass to you.
Well, thank you very much, Fred, to allow me to speak to you today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ben. I'm excited to be able to have a chat together with you. And by the way, thank you for both of you for your service to enhance what I believe is extremely important cooperation between US and Europe. So Ben, maybe before having the pleasure to exchange with you and the audience, I may address for a few minutes. I would my speech pretty carefully regarding, let's say, the circumstances and the situation. And of course, I am extremely happy to be here with you live after our meeting a few months ago. And I think, Fred, you mentioned it. This visit is pretty timely. I did not anticipate this, but it's true that after the withdrawal of the US troops from Afghanistan, the AUKUS deal between the US, Australia, and the UK, by the way, announced the very same day when Europe announced their own Indo-Pacific strategy. I think nothing happened by hazard in our world. It is true that some see this in Europe as a wake-up call for Europe. To tell you the truth, I planned this visit many weeks ago with, of course, a very positive agenda to deepen EU-US cooperation, which is something that I believe I do pretty well, and I like to do it because I know the benefit of this partnership. To strengthen our supply chain, to fight together against a global pandemic, to invest the right way in our technological landscape, to regulate in an appropriate way our digital space. And while all of this is still very much on the menu, and I have had very constructive meetings here these days, something has changed. There is indeed a growing feeling in Europe, and I say this with regret, that something is broken in our transatlantic relations. A partnership works when both parties are honest and truthful with each other, when both parties treat each other with respect, and when both partners are strong. And of course, when there is trust. But of course, we are not naive. Trust is not a given. And after the latest event, there is, I should say, a strong perception that trust between the EU and US has been just eroded. So it is probably time to maybe pause and reset our EU-US relationship. But let's review it case by case, and I will start, if you allow me, with the fight to the global pandemic. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 situation, we have learned the hard way that no single country, in fact, no single continent, can fight a global pandemic alone. Today, the EU and US account for more than half of all vaccine doses produced and delivered around the world. And almost all mRNA vaccines are done by us. If global manufacturing capacity skyrocketed, it is, of course, and I should say it again, thanks to our two continents. Yesterday's decision to lift the US travel ban on fully vaccinated Europeans is welcome, Fred. You mentioned it. But let's be honest, logical, we should have done this before. Because at the end of the day, Europe is the first continent in terms of people being vaccinated. So it's true that we did not understand very well why we were in the list of Iran, Brazil, China, and so on. But it's a good thing that it's done now, and I'm extremely happy for all these families who will be able to be together again. I should say that in fighting the pandemic, Europe has lived up to its responsibilities. Large amount of vaccine precursors material have been shipped from EU to the US, allowing the US to boost its vaccine production. And more importantly, the EU has exported half of its own production to support more than 100 countries and to vaccinate more than 100 countries. We have been the only one to do this. Now, if I may be frank, when the US government deployed the Defense Production Act earlier this year, it created concrete tensions among the EU-based vaccine producer regarding the availability and the access to key materials. And it is only when the EU put forward our export authorization scheme that we were able to engage back with our US friends in a frank and operational dialogue to unblock supply chains, ingredient per ingredient, product per product, producer per producer, and I did it with my team. By the way, thanks also to the cooperation of that we had on the other side with Jeff Zients. We will, of course, continue working with the US on securing vaccine production. And in this vein, yesterday, we marked the first official meeting of the Joint Task Force on COVID-19 Manufacturing Supply Chains together with my counterpart, Jeff Zients. Because also we have made the world safer. Let's not forget that the EU and US, of course, only represent 10% of the population of our planet. And to eradicate the virus and its variants, we need to sustain these efforts, not only for ourselves, of course, but now for the rest of the world. And that means continuing to export, helping other continents develop their own production facilities so that we accelerate the pace of global vaccination. Let's move now to technology and investing in technological leadership. Revisiting our supply chains, avoiding vulnerabilities, making the right investment to our citizens, this must also be done in new technologies where the EU and the US share common dependencies on third countries. Take semiconductors, for example, where technology and geopolitics are increasingly hard to separate. Global shortage is affecting many industrial sectors across the globe, and therefore the daily life of our citizens. Today, for example, 80% of global semiconductors production is located in Asia, and we know, of course, the role of Taiwan, while Europe and the US hold 10% each from both sides of the Atlantic. We therefore need to retake control and rebalance the global supply chains of semiconductors. Last week, President von der Leyen announced the launch of the European Chip Act, which aims to turn our scientific and research excellence and untapped capacity into industrial leadership. Those who think it's just about rivaling the US are wrong. It is about technological sovereignty, about having enough autonomy to make the right choices for Europe. To do this, we must strengthen our industrial capacity in Europe. It is not a question of wanting to produce everything, of course, we need in Europe. We need to diversify our supply chains in order to decrease over-dependencies on a single country or region. And while the EU aims to remain the top global destination for foreign investment, we also need to make our local productions more resilient and preserve, of course, Europe's security of supply. I spoke earlier about how a successful partnership requires both parties being strong. Well, let me be clear on this. In a world of growing uncertainties, it's the America's best interest to have a strong and sovereign Europe as partner. This is what I said to Senator Mark Warner yesterday, and what I will convey this afternoon to Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo. It is also in this spirit that I am approaching the discussion in the Tech and Trade Council. Certainly, Europe and the US have a lot to cooperate on in tech. And as a tech commissioner, I very much value partnerships, of course. And I know that in technology, this is paramount. Partnerships are built by combining respective strengths. For now, on several tech issues, including semiconductors, I see pretty well where Europe's strengths lie, including, of course, our added value. I have, of course, yet to understand what the US will bring to the table. Despite what some may think or wish, this discussion is not about classical trade negotiation with gives and takes. It is about our future industrial position. Europe has to and will, of course, carefully assess its interest, also in the light of the new geopolitical realities. One word on space, if you allow me. This is, of course, something also extremely important and a common challenge in regulating the digital space. Digital space, of course, is definitely first what I want to speak, and then I speak on space. Even you all know that on both sides on the Atlantic, we have been exposed to let's say, the role of the platforms and the consequences in terms of fragility on our democracies, and also to the threat that under-regulated tech companies can pose to their survival through the spread of disinformation or, let's say, also hate speech. And I think we are at a moment now where the US and the EU have an opportunity to establish global standards for balanced digital regulation that counters illiberal practices. Europe is doing its fair share. We are moving fast and first. With the Digital Market Act and the Digital Services Act, we want to ensure a safe, fair, competitive, and innovative digital economy. And this objective stemmed from the same principle and values that the US cherishes. Free speech, consumer protection, safety of minors, open markets, and rule of law. Obviously, upholding these common values in the digital space also means stepping up our game on cybersecurity. And here again, no one of us can do it alone. The EU and the US face the same cybersecurity threat, and we must therefore unite our effort, in particular to combat ransomware, to improve cybersecurity, information sharing and supply chain security, including 5G, critical ICT supply chain, such as data or cloud. And these technologies will be, of course, absolutely essential for our safety, prosperity, and resilience in the year to come. So for space, I will allow you for some questions to speed up. And I just want to conclude now to tell you that, of course, the pandemic, the technological race, the ongoing conflicts, yes, we can say that times are volatile, and no one, of course, is, we know that, the center of the planet. So cooperation is absolutely key. The European Union will remain, of course, open, but on terms and conditions we set ourselves, protecting Europe's strategic interests, such as, I mentioned it already, our security of supply. And this is also true in the field of security and defense. I firmly believe that a common defense for Europe is the way forward. It is not about rejecting our historical alliances. On the contrary, it is about being able to act on our own when needed, when these alliances are not ready to, or able to do so. Be it on industrial production, technology, or defense strategic autonomy is about ensuring Europe's freedom and capacity to act. It can only strengthen our ties and our common endeavor to create a better world together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Breton. I'm Ben Haddad. I'm the director of the Europe Center here at the Atlantic Council. I'm honored and delighted to welcome you, Commissioner Breton, to our brand new studio here at Atlantic Council headquarters in Washington, D.C. We have a live audience. We have obviously a large virtual audience to continue this conversation with you, and I'll turn to a couple of my colleagues, Julia Friedlander and Fran Broa, as well, to ask questions. You mentioned it in your speech. We're here in difficult times in the transatlantic relationship. You said something is broken. You talked about a pause and reset and a wake-up call. What's next? I mean, where do we go from there in the relationship between the EU and the US?
Well, I said exactly that there is a feeling now, a growing feeling in Europe that something is growing. It's a feeling. It's a feeling for our fellow citizens, within our fellow citizens. It's a feeling within some member states. And of course, and I mentioned it a few minutes ago, the strength of our partnership is extremely important and paramount. Take again the vaccines. We are not yet done, of course. But if we are where we are today, with almost 70% of the adult population vaccinated from both sides of the Atlantic, we know that we still have to move ahead. It is because of the cooperation between Europe and US. And when I say cooperation, on the 6 vaccines working today, 5 have been developed in Europe by scientific researchers, funded by European money. And of course, we put this together, then the BARDA came. It's a really, I should say, in terms of science and technology and industrial capacity, it's a European-US partnership success. We need to continue this because we know that if hopefully at the end of the year everybody will be fully vaccinated on both continents, it will represent 10% of the population, and we need already to take care of the rest of the world. And it's our joint responsibility. This is why it was very important yesterday, together with Jeff Zients, to continue the work that we have done. And I should say that we worked extremely well together with our joint team, where it has been decided last June between President Biden and President von der Leyen now to create together a joint task force, US-EU. We are working together already for the past year, so we know how to do this very well. But it's important to continue to enhance it for us and for the rest of the world. Same thing, for example, for the fight against climate change. That's extremely important. We know that it will be hopefully a success for the planet, and there's a lot of challenges if Europe and the EU cooperate. For the rest, we have also some other things. I hear that some of our member states, some of our voices in Europe, say that maybe we need a pause after Afghanistan, after the ban that nobody understood, after what happened last week with this new AUKUS. I mean, there is these voices, and we need to. That's a political reality. Of course, personally, I regret it. I hope that we'll be able to work again in good spirit, trust, because at the end of the day, we are allies. We have been allies for decades. We will be allies for decades. But we want everybody to remind this on both sides of the Atlantic. And by the way, regarding China, we know that China is our systemic rival.
Yeah. I want to continue on the concept of strategic autonomy. You made an impassioned plea right now for it, and you've been vocal with some of your EU colleagues on this concept. We heard you after the lack of consultation of the Afghanistan withdrawal. This is a concept that's often misunderstood, both in the United States, but also in some parts of Europe, where it's seen as breaking away from the alliance or independence or equidistance between the United States and China, for example. What do you say to those voices that are afraid of Europe's path to strategic autonomy?
Well, you know, we are politicians, and in politics, words are important. And it's true that in Europe, our continent is made of 27 countries. We align, of course, our global interests more and more, which is good. But we have our own culture, our own history. This is what makes Europe. And this is also maybe why we are one of, if not the most advanced democracy on the planet. And it's difficult. And it requires a lot of capacity to listen to everyone. And when you speak to, let's say, to sovereignty or strategic autonomy, this resonates differently in different parts of Europe. That's true. So this is why instead of using words, I prefer to use a full sentence, saying, for example, that what we believe and what we learn every other day including with what happened in our relation over the past few weeks and months, is that in some areas, we need to be able to take our decision and to monitor our destiny ourselves. Look at the vaccine. Believe me, I've been in charge. And when I realized that a lot of our suddenly the supply chains were blocked between EU and US. Never in my life. I thought I will have to cope with this situation. We had many factories in the US, European factories, not able to work anymore with us. It has been painful. What did we learn? Continue to cooperate, and also, to increase our ability to secure on our own the supply. So same thing in some areas in defense, same thing in some areas in semiconductors, in technology. It doesn't mean that we want to do everything on our own. It just means that we need to take the decisions together when we believe it is crucial for Europe and our fellow citizens. We need to secure some areas where it's critical, because sometimes even our strongest ally will not be able or not willing to do what is needed for us.
And as you said earlier, a strong and sovereign Europe would be also in the interest, of course, of
like always,
alliance.
in partnership, you need to have a strong partner. And again, I repeat, we will be partners for decades again. And I think it is in this complex world, it is definitely the interest of our US friend to have a strong ally in Europe.
I'm already seeing some great questions on the chat, which I will pick up. I want to turn a little bit, talk about technology and digital issues. Continue sending your questions, continue tweeting at #ACFrontPage, and we'll pick them up. I'm going to turn to my colleague, Fran Burwell, in a minute. Before that, I just want to ask you very quickly, there's been some rumors about whether the Transatlantic Tech and Trade Council, which the first edition was supposed to be hosted in Pittsburgh, I think later this month, could be paused. Do you have any comment on that?
No, Ben, I don't have any comment. I don't have any information on that. But as much as one of the co-chair of the meeting mentioned, she said nothing breathtaking from this meeting. This is what she expected. So. But we'll see. I don't have any information.
All right. I'm going to turn to Fran Burwell. He's a distinguished fellow with the Atlantic Council and leading our work at the Europe Center on shaping common norms and standards across the Atlantic in the digital space.
Thanks very much, Ben. Commissioner Breton, welcome to the Atlantic Council. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to chat with you. You are often regarded in the media as the champion of digital sovereignty in the European institutions. On this side of the Atlantic, and I would say despite your words earlier, I think that we're still not always sure exactly what digital sovereignty means and what it requires in a policy approach. What does it mean to you? How do you define it, and does it bring with it the risk of protectionism? Will it require excluding others to build European capabilities? And here I would point to the Digital Markets Act, which you mentioned, and the widespread assumption right now that the gatekeepers and the way they're defined would apply primarily, if not only, to US companies. Are US companies in a special category compared to other non-EU companies when you think about digital sovereignty? Could you help us understand this concept? Thank you.
So thank you very much for this question. And by the way, we must refer to the author of the words. I'm not the author of digital sovereignty. It's Chancellor Merkel who is the author of digital sovereignty. And by the way, when Chancellor Merkel was leading Europe 6 months ago, she put digital sovereignty, and she explained what she meant by digital sovereignty on the top list of her agenda. So I just propose that you see what she means by that, and as in charge of digital in the Commission, I refer to her statement. But you will understand while reading what she means by that it means that in some areas we need to keep our capacity to act on our own. Let me give you an example. You mentioned it, Ben, or I think Fred mentioned it, that I have been also Minister of Finance, but I've been also leading some big tech companies, including in telecom. And I should tell you that there is a huge concern in Europe, especially for companies, to understand what will happen with their own data. We all understand the Patriot Act. We all understand the Cloud Act. For example, digital sovereignty means, of course, to be able to tell exactly to our companies what happened to what is most important to them, their data. So yes, Cloud Act 3, it's digital sovereignty. But of course, it doesn't mean that no one could come. We welcome everybody. And you know, all my life I did that. We are rules. We have to be clear in our rules. Everybody will have to understand our rules. My mission is to make sure that they are simple, they are readable, legible, and they will last for long. So that's basically what we mean by this. Now, regarding the DMA, I could reassure you. This target nobody. This is really something not against, but for Europeans. This is my job. My job is to make sure that I'm working for, let's say, European growth, European competitiveness, European companies. That's my job. And of course, in this, we welcome everyone. But of course, it's true that we decided that, and by the way, this is exactly the same discussion in the US, that some big companies are so big now that they maybe sometimes act as gatekeepers. And you mentioned some US companies. We don't have only US companies in the world. We have also other companies, big companies in Europe, big companies in Asia, big companies in China. And this is exactly these companies which are taking consideration in the DMA. But I assure you, nothing against anyone in person, and especially not in the US. So thank you for allowing me to clarify this.
I want to continue on this question of digital sovereignty and DMA, DSA. The EU has really risen as a global standard and norm setter on the international stage on digital issues, and there are plans on AI, for example. But it hasn't been the innovative superpower that others, like especially the United States, are. Could there be seen a form of tension between the two? Can we regulate without innovating? And in a way, who really shapes the norm? Is it the innovator and the creator, the Silicon Valley, for example? Or is it the regulator who's reacting to the technology?
No, I really understand your question, and it's a fair question. And I really should say that for us, you know, let's be honest. The discussion about how to behave in the digital space is not a European discussion. It is a discussion extremely vibrant here in the US, with, by the way, more radical proposals that are here, including in the Senate. That's what we did. This is a just normal discussion that we need to have as policymakers. Because guess what? Our children spend some time, as much as time in the digital space than in the physical space. And we see that there is no, in many cases, no regulation here to protect our children, to protect our democracy. I don't want to come back on January 6th, to protect what we cherish. So what we said is something extremely simple, is that everything which is authorized in the physical world should be authorized in the digital world. But everything which is forbidden in the physical world has to be forbidden also in the digital world. This is exactly what is the DSR about. Nothing more, nothing less. And I strongly believe that it's not about regulating for the sake of regulating. I have been a CEO all my life. I have been a professor at Harvard, teaching in Harvard Business School even. So, but I know also that it is our job to propose this. And by the way, before preparing this, we are the only, sorry to say that, continent to have asked for almost 1 year to the planet, what do you believe? We had 3,000 contributions, a lot coming from the United States, from governments, from countries, from NGOs, from everyone. And we took time, and we worked. And we believe that what we propose is pretty balanced. And by the way, maybe it will give some ideas to our US friends.
I'm going to turn in a minute to my colleague Julia Friedlander for another question. Before that, I want to pick up, I think, an important question from the chat from Larry Jakes, who's a New York Times correspondent, who's asking you why the EU is opposing the waiver on IP rights on vaccines.
No, I think it's a misunderstanding. First, I should say that, as I said, we have more or less 6 vaccines, maybe 7 vaccines, which are really, I should say, working. I mean, we mentioned 4 of them have been developed with their patents in Europe, 2 in the US, okay, fine, or something like that. So it's not a question of, today, it's not a question on patents. I should tell you that being in charge for our continent of the ramping up of the industrial capacity, it is definitely a problem of industrial capacity and infrastructure. I was myself, I showed the picture that you in your presentation in Senegal 2 months ago. We initiated with Team Europe the first facility manufacturing fab for a vaccine in Senegal. I mean, it's a very complex process. It takes time, but we need to do this. Before giving the patent free, we need to organize ourselves. Where do we believe it's appropriate to have these facilities? And you need, of course, already an infrastructure. Why Senegal? Because for 8 years, Institut Pasteur was already in Senegal, and that Senegal is making the yellow fever vaccines for the planet. So they have skills, they have supply chains, they have networks, they have an ecosystem. But it's pretty difficult. And it takes 18 months to do this. And then, of course, will come the time who will be the lab will come, or the company, under which condition. But we cannot wait. If you say, I give you the patents and not wait, it reminds me, and sorry for the comparison, but I saw during this let's say, time, you know, of course, you are familiar with the Russian vaccine, so-called Sputnik 5. Sputnik, I mean, Russians were saying it's a great vaccine and so on, and you can get it, and at the end of the day, I should tell you, and I don't want to blame anyone, but we realized that it was extremely difficult for them to manufacture this vaccine, just to make it manufacturing in a plant, because it's extremely complex. So that's why doing step by step in terms of vaccine and in terms of the capacity to do what we have to do. First, we open world border. For, let's say, a year, we have been the only one to be able to vaccine the rest of all our allies, all the NATO allies, and the US were closed. And it has been painful and difficult, but we did it. And we did it with half of our production. It was difficult for our population to explain that it was our mission to do this, not to close our borders. Second thing, of course, to get ready to share vaccines. This is the most important thing, because now we need to be able to vaccinate the population, and we cannot wait 2 years. And at the same time, start to identify how to help these countries in Africa, in South America, and elsewhere, to start to build their own capacity. And then will come this question at the end of the day, but it will be important. But do it step by step. Open your border, give the vaccines, try to identify where to build these factories.
Thank you. And I think it is very important that you underline that the EU did export a lot of its vaccine production.
More than half of its production, more than half, in more than 100 countries. Canada, Mexico, all our NATO allies, everybody, Japan, Israel.
Let me turn to my colleague Julia Friedlander, who is the Boyden Gray Senior Fellow and the Deputy Director of our Geoeconomic Center here at the Atlantic Council.
Thanks, Ben. And Mr. Commissioner, thank you again so much for joining us today. I know that you have a very busy agenda in Washington. I have a question first about the EU CHIPS Act that President von der Leyen has announced and you yourself outlined for us on LinkedIn. and about how funds will be appropriated among member states given the heterogeneity of national economies to promote technological development in this area. And we're having enough trouble with that, I think, thinking about how we're going to roll it out in the United States on a state level. And the second, maybe a little more broadly and philosophically, how do you view economic competitiveness, and either driven by markets or by the state, as an element of national security policy? Right. And I think that that's drawing that line, I think, is crucial for working with the United States, because those are the terms that the Biden administration is using. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. That's very important questions. The first one, you're absolutely right. By the way, I was yesterday meeting with Senator Warner. He's, as you know, leading, he's chairing the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, but he's also the sponsor of the US CHIP Act. And we were discussing this, exactly this question together. First, President von der Leyen announced this EU CHIP Act. It is, the calibration is almost the same that in the US. $52 billion for the US. It's roughly the same figures for EU together with our member states. So we are discussing a comparable amount of money, which is important, of course. The second thing, of course, is that we have to be careful here because we will use public money, of course, and it means that we have to be extremely cautious. And for us in Europe, in order to make sure that we want to align everybody. So we have created a semiconductor alliance. In other words, we put together all the participants of the semiconductor ecosystem. When I say all, we invited, of course, all companies, European companies. We invited R&D centers. We invited everybody, including member states, who believe they have something to say here and to be part of it. And then, of course, we are deciding now what is our strategy. And the strategy, of course, is should be simple to explain. For us, it is first to increase the capacity of production to double it, let's say, in the next 10 years. In the US, it's to triple it. Together, US and EU should be able to have together the capacity to produce 50% of the world need in semiconductors by the end of this decade. 30% in the US, 20% for us. The second thing is, of course, to know how we will be able to support these investments which are needed. And for us, of course, it means that we are welcoming, of course, foreign investment. We are welcoming any kind of companies. To tell you the truth, I'm in discussions with a lot of some US companies. Or we are discussing also with Asian companies. And at the end of the day, it's important to discuss what to do with it and with what kind of technology we want to use. So we have now a pretty clear agenda or roadmap, and that's something that we can offer, of course, to non-EU partners to make sure that they will contribute with, of course, our own conditions in terms of security of supply, which is, as you could imagine, extremely important. Then, of course, we have to avoid the kind of race for subsidies between one country and the others. And that's something that was a concern with a discussion I had yesterday. Maybe I will have this discussion again this afternoon with Secretary Raimondo. So we need also to see how we can organize this. The last point for us is, of course, to be able to coordinate even better our R&D. We have extremely strong R&D centers in Europe, and of course we want to be able to align all our strengths here. So that's a lot of work, but it's interesting also to exchange here our views with our US partners. The second question about national security policies, that's of course a very important question. I will just take one example to answer to your question. When I joined as a commissioner in charge of digital, of course, I had to cope with the 5G, let's say, story and question. And you remember it was high on the agenda of the previous administration, the Trump administration. And from the US part, it has been very clear, to answer to your question, it has been, this company is forbidden, period. I will not give you the name, but you will recognize it probably. For us, we took a totally different approach. we meet, and I did it with my team, all member states. We decided to define the criteria which were extremely important to protect a national interest in 5G deployment, and we know that we have a lot of risk here. We put this we call it a 5G toolbox that everyone agreed and supported. And of course, we said then, which is true, everybody is welcome, of course, to come to invest in Europe as long as you fulfill with these requirements. In other words, we say if you fulfill, you are not a high-risk supplier. If you don't fulfill, you are considered as a high-risk supplier. And we have been able to find to find our ways. So that's the European way.
That's the European way. Commissioner Breton, your portfolio is so large and there's so much on the agenda that I think we could have continued this conversation for a while, but we're running out of time. I really want to thank you for coming and having such an open conversation with us. At the Europe Center of the Atlantic Council, we'll continue to make the case for strong EU-US relations with a very strong and autonomous EU at the core of this relationship. But that also means having frank and direct conversation among friends and allies, and I think you showed that here as you usually do. So thank you so much for joining us, and I do hope we'll be able to host you soon in the future and continue the conversation.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you very much for the service of the Atlantic Council. That's extremely important for us. Thank you.
Thank you, and join us soon for the next AC Front Page.